Hi, I'm Katrine. I grew up in Denmark and I've lived in the UK since 2001, and I'm a proud autistic woman. In my adult life, I have traveled extensively, worked as a journalist and editor, owned companies, been married, and had children. So far, so relatively neurotypical, particularly when framed within my ex husband and children's very extrovert, outgoing, and social ADHD. I've been the organized introvert holding all the strings together, the planner, either the quiet person with attention to detail or the person who's too bossy or direct. Autism wasn't on the radar for me as a possibility while growing up or in my life generally, despite always having an urgent need for solitude, being either too awkward or too forward in social situations, a desperate craving for control, or the anxiety that that masked. However, one day within the last 6 months, at the age of 42, I was listening to a podcast on neurodiversity to deepen my understanding of my children's ADHD when the presenters started talking about how autism can manifest itself in women. I froze and I actually burst into tears as I suddenly understood my life story and behavioral patterns through a lens that made sense. I made sense. I was fortunate to have the funds to pay for a diagnostic assessment, as I felt I needed to know if it made sense to others outside myself and those who knew me. It has profoundly shifted my perspective of my life history. It's been a relief to suddenly understand and accept that my lifelong feeling of alienation has a name, a community, a way for me to understand and accept my own challenges as well as strengths, and to find a pride in who I am and a growing acceptance of my own needs. The realization of my autistic identity made me change directions quite radically. I went back to university as a mature student a year and a half ago to do a master's degree and to find the direction I wanted to pursue going forwards now that my children are getting older. I study environmental anthropology, research into cultures, human patterns of behaviors, and why we do what we do, framed by an environmental perspective. But I hadn't found a research direction that spoke to me and that I connected with. Suddenly, I did. In true special interest fashion, I dropped all my previous work directions and threw myself headfirst into trying to develop what I called naturally connected neurodiversity. I deliberately focused on qualitative over quantitative research. I didn't want to look at statistics and figures, but to give a voice to the narratives and the lived experiences. I wondered how to connect with other autistic women for the project. So I set up a website. Naturalneurodiversity.com provides a full outline of the objectives, existing scholarship, methods, significance, references, and ethics to make sure the potential research participants have all the relevant information. My aim is to increase the visibility of this particular autistic experience. Hopefully, the site can evolve to become an additional resource for narratives for others to identify with, learn from, support, and explore our individual journeys. I'm proud to be both part of the autistic community, working for increased research as a cultural translator for our autistic experiences and our voices to be heard. Thank you.
A rose by any other name would smell of stigma, or the psychologically important difference between being a person with autism or an autistic person. So I shall pose a question. Is identifying with social groups beneficial to people's health and well-being? Whilst marking undergrad essays on this question back in 2020, my mind began to wander, as it is prone to do, to autistic things. Although my PhD was in the field of social psychology, attempting to reduce mental health stigma with the neurodiversity narrative, I had become so engrossed in my little sliver of the field, I forgot about other social psychological theories and approaches. I researched the references my students were citing and made a short Twitter thread of my thoughts regarding the psychologically important difference between being a person with autism and an autistic person. The difference between belonging to a stigmatised group and the social cure properties of strongly identifying with an autistic identity. In that Twitter thread, I started by saying that belonging to a stigmatised group, for instance people with autism, and internalising the stigma can negatively affect psychological and physical health. Let's break that down. To be a person with autism, a person labelled, sometimes officially, with a medical disorder, means we as autistic people are categorised into a certain box. Even before being diagnosed or knowing of our diagnosis, our behaviours are called out as odd and weird, and we are labelled standoffish, cold and unapproachable. For instance, this picture of my friend Annette's shoulder has words written in Sharpie permanent marker. Annette bears 3 words used to describe me throughout my adult life. Those words, cold, standoffish, unapproachable, were internalised until I discovered I was autistic in 2016. This labelled box, person or people with autism, is imbued with meaning, with values and assumptions that dictate action. A case in point would be Greta Thunberg. As well as receiving sexist, misogynistic attacks, Greta has been harassed, stigmatised and infantilised for being a person with autism, receiving the sorts of comments autistic people hear far too often, such as how Greta is a mentally ill Swedish child, deeply disturbed, makes bizarre facial expressions, is a girl who has a cyborg face that ignores emotion. I will not link the original perpetrators of these insults. They are undeserving of the citations. There are a number of reasons that Greta has received these insults. Largely, they are a tactic to discredit her activism. What I am highlighting, however, is the content of the attacks, the narrative that is being told, and consequently what autistic people the world over are hearing, a pathologising othering of our experience of and with the world. Our difference is used against us, embedded in a narrative that we are not normal, that we are abnormal, that we are disordered people with autism spectrum disorder. But what's wrong with stating you're a person with autism? It's what you are, isn't it? And we've been taught it's polite to put the person first. we hear all too often. When someone insists that I am a person with autism, they are telling me that they believe I have something that if science could eradicate would mean I would be normal. It is not non-autistic people's fault. The culture of autism, the dominant narrative, one of many and not even the most persuasive, tells me that I have an autism spectrum disorder. Break that phrase down. I have, not I am, but I have. I carry. I could theoretically put down autism. And this is offered as the preferred outcome, the ability to be removed from my autism because I am disordered. Belonging to this category is isolating, depressing and hopeless. I am socially cursed by belonging to the category of people with autism. As you can imagine, both the public and internalised self-stigma has a negative impact on one's psychological and physical health. And so, as a minority group, people with autism are likely to experience minority stress and stigma by virtue of non-adherence to societal norms and expectations. Simply put, as a minority, people with autism are different to what is expected of members of society, and so we are thought of and treated differently. This stigma leads to social disadvantages. As a minority, group members experience greater stress, and due to our standing in society, we do not have the resources, social, psychological or material, to manage this stress. However, one can protect oneself from this stigma to some extent via different means. For instance, distancing oneself from the group by saying, I am not like those low-functioning people with autism, or the opposite, by more closely socially identifying with the group autistic so as to feel the effect of group protective properties such as resources, peer support, meaning and belonging and so on. And so there can be a social cure. There is hope if we identify with the social identity autistic, connecting with autistic culture. Autism, remember, is a reified, abstract construct, whereas autistic people and our culture less so. Connecting with the autistic community, we can learn a narrative that makes logical sense of our difference, that provides connection, not isolation. An autistic community definition of autism defines our difference within the neurodiversity paradigm, where difference is difference, not less. Where autism is a neurodevelopmental difference, where autistic brains work differently to non-autistic people, where there are as many different brains and ways of experiencing the world as there are different bodies. There is a variety of autistic people, just as there is a variety of non-autistic people, but all autistic people share some similarities, and that's what connects us. These similarities include differences in experience of the sensory world, communication differences, thinking, socialising and moving. Some autistic people need support with day-to-day living, and within this perspective there is no one way to be autistic. Evidence is mounting that what is important for autistic well-being is autistic friendship, community and peer support. For instance, a study by Crompton et al. Uses a quote from an autistic interviewee for its title, "I never realised everybody felt as happy as I do when I'm around autistic people." A thematic analysis of autistic adults' relationships with autistic and neurotypical friends and family. Myself, I see the protective social cure properties of community and space in my co-founded So You're Autistic programme, which is a pre and post discovery support programme. We also have a University of Kent Autistics group, both run by me and Annette Foster. Some of our aims in these community spaces are to help students foster a positive autistic identity, to deconstruct the pathologising person with autism narrative, and ultimately help bring previously isolated autistic people together to foster a sense of community. Creating these autistic spaces, not non-autistic person with autism spaces, seems to encourage its members to be their authentic selves without judgment. Encouragingly, we also see an improvement in well-being with reductions in harmful stims, self-stimulatory behaviours that inadvertently harm. We see reductions in depression and burnout. Evidence is also demonstrating the protective properties of a strong autistic social identity. For instance, Cooper et al. In 2017 found that participants in their study who had strong autistic social identities had greater collective self-esteem for the autistic community, which in turn predicted greater positive personal self-esteem, ultimately predicting reduced levels of anxiety and depression, which, as we know, are higher in the autistic community. So, when people ask why we want to be diagnosed or discovered to associate with other people with autism, why we insist on identifying as autistic to be that pesky autistic community, whether we know it or not, in part, it is because the alternative is to still belong to a stigmatised group and to internalise the stigma to the detriment of our psychological and social need to belong. Without strongly identifying with the autistic identity, the community, we do not feel positive belongingness. Our physical and psychological well-being is damaged. We do not have peer resources to lean on. We lack meaning, things groups and identities provide. And so, I belong to the stigmatised group of people with autism, but I strongly socially identify with the identity autistic. To belong, have a sense of meaning, to have peer support. The autistic identity, more specifically the autistic community, is my social cure, and it's beautiful. Where before we were isolated by belonging to the group people with autism, we come to embrace the autistic identity, culture, community and space. We are no longer alone. We are connected by one word, autistic. The autistic identity, the community, helps start the process of removing the lifelong pain of prejudice and discrimination for being different. We start to scrub off the Sharpie drawn tattoos together. It hurts, it takes time, there is residue, but we can start to connect and heal. Ultimately, autistic identity, community, culture and ideally spaces protect against the stigma of belonging to the group people with autism. This is why, regardless of whether you personally agree that I am a person with autism spectrum disorder or an autistic person, strong identification with the identity autistic has important and protective well-being properties. And so, as you can see, a rose, autistic, by any other name, person with autism, reeks of stigma, suffused with negative stereotypes, prejudice and discriminatory behaviours. Or why it is more important for me to be respected as autistic rather than a person with an autism spectrum disorder.
Hey everyone, so I'm Monique Botha and I am an autism research psychologist. And what I'm going to be talking about today is an autistic identity and community connectedness, particularly autistic community connectedness. So a lot of my PhD research actually focused on like the some of the negatives around being autistic, not around actually being autistic, but the way that autistic people are treated in society, because autistic people get exposed to a lot of minority stress. Particularly, we are marginalized, punished for being autistic. We experience an overwhelming stigma and discrimination. Um, but amongst all of that, there is this really beautiful thing, and that is the autistic community. So, autistic people are often described as being like asocial and not interested in forming social bonds. There are some really outdated conversations about how we lack sociability and stuff. And well, actually, a lot of my work um, looked at autistic community connectedness and basically the solidarity and the relationships that autistic people form with other autistic people. And oh boy, is that something to have pride in, because essentially, despite what is happening around autistic people, there is this connectivity that things like the internet have facilitated that means that autistic people can connect all over the world on their own terms in more accessible ways. And the autistic community is a big part of a lot of autistic people's lives. It gives them access, or us access, to things like meaningful friendships in ways that don't push us into these tiny little boxes where we have to socialize in a particular way. And one of the things that a lot of the autistic people I interviewed said was that, it's absolutely astounding. I can just be myself with other autistic people, and I don't need to apologize for that. I am not only accepted despite my idiosyncrasies, instead, I am embraced for them. I'm allowed to do things like info dump to tell people all about the things that I'm interested in. Um, I'm allowed to express what it is that I want it, when I need it. Um, and these are all things that autistic people felt like they had to hide around non autistic people, particularly if those people were neurotypical. Um, and similarly, aside from this, autistic people are connected to what was described as an almost power grid political identity, where a lot of autistic people are working towards a better future for younger autistic people so that they don't have to grow up with the same marginalization that, for example, we experienced. And I think that there's something really to be proud of in the fact that autistic people forge beautiful friendships, try to make a better future for people like us who might grow up in a world that is a little bit less terrible to autistic people. And also the beauty in these neurodivergent friendships that do look different, do sound different, aren't different, but are so valuable and worthwhile. And I think it's good to celebrate these friendships where you can walk in and info dump about mushrooms or about, I mean, it's stereotypical, but trains or books or board games or literally anything in the world that has, taken up your interest. And I know I myself am surrounded by a fantastic group of neurodivergent friends. Um, and I absolutely love learning about whatever it is that has piqued their interest over the last few weeks. And I cannot tell you how great it has made me at pub quizzes, for example, because I know the most niche information ever, and that's fantastic, actually. Um, And I think, as well as that, despite the things that autistic people face, and we shouldn't be facing things like minority stress or marginalization, we shouldn't be discriminated against. But despite all of that, I think there is a true power to the fact that autistic people resist stigma. We reframe the meaning of autism around the things that are important to us to try make it a little bit less negative in the way people talk about it, and also in the way that we reclaim things that are important to our identities, whether that's things like identity first language and saying autistic, or whether it's reclaiming our ways of socializing, to destigmatize them from the caricature of autism that is embedded in kind of those pathologizing narratives. I think the autistic community, we are creative, we are responsive, we are a welcoming hub of people who want to make a difference to the autistic people who come next, and that is a celebration worth having. Um, it acknowledges, or it should be acknowledged, that autistic people have an immense power when connected with other autistic people, an immense power that brings joy and acceptance and belongingness to a group of people who, I don't know, but we don't experience that much. And the fact that we can, do a radical thing or be radical just by being ourselves with other autistic people it's pretty special. Thank you.
So, how does autistic community impact pride and well-being? I will always remember the feeling that came over me the first time I started to suspect I was autistic. I'd spent most of my life up to that point feeling like I was broken. I could never explain why or how, I just knew that I was different, and I knew that to other people, for whatever reason, that different wasn't good. A few years back, I was in a really bad place mentally. I was sad a lot of the time. I was confused and scared because I didn't know what my future held, and I was really, really lonely. And then one day, as I was scrolling through Instagram, I stumbled across an account, and it was a service dog account, and I just completely fell in love with this big, goofy Great Dane. It really quickly became one of my favourite accounts, and after a while the handlers started posting more personal content, and they started talking about their autistic experience, and it completely changed my perspective. At the time I had a very black and white perspective of autism, and if you were to make a list of all the autistic stereotypes, I believed almost all of them. And then the more they posted, the more what they were saying spoke to me on a level that was deeper than just learning something new. It didn't take long before I started to realise that I was also autistic. And I remember just being flooded with feelings of realisation and self-acceptance and hope. And from there I found the autistic advocacy side of Instagram. I followed so many other different accounts, and I just engulfed myself in autistic content, and I started talking to people and unlearning everything I thought I knew. I found answers to questions I didn't even realise I had. I started to rediscover myself, and I found comfort in community. I found a place where I didn't feel so alone. So fast forward a few years, and I truly feel at home in this wonderfully autistic body of mine. The service dog handler I was talking about is now one of my best friends. And I made so many other friends too, as well as being surrounded and uplifted by others like me in online spaces. I found Orcademy a little over 3 months ago, and I physically can't put into words the positive impact it has had on my life and mental health, even in such a short time. The online spaces Orcademy have created honestly feel like home. A few weeks ago I was watching an Orcademy video on YouTube, and Chloe briefly talked about an idea she had, and some others, for Autopia, an autistic communal living space. But it sounded like so much more than that, and I couldn't stop thinking about it, and it sent my brain spiraling into hyperfixation, and the idea just grew and formed into my own version of Autopia. Just imagine a community of people who are connected in the experience of being pathologized by society and being able to provide a haven. A place where everyone has compassion and understanding, where no one's differences get viewed as flaws. Where everyone can just be them unapologetically in all the best ways. And there would be something for everyone, and everyone who entered would be given the best opportunities to flourish. And I got so excited about this idea in my head that I made a whole PowerPoint about it. I know I've been rambling, but there is a point to what I'm saying. The question was, how does autistic community impact pride and well-being? And the truth is, I think my feelings about the autistic community are far too full to fit the bounds of any single question. The autistic community allows people to flourish in even the poorest of soils. It is the calm in the raging storm and the lighthouse when everything else feels dark. It sparks a firework display of inspiration and motivation and drive, and it sets you free from the cage to soar high and see the world in the way that you were always designed. The autistic community is a rainbow of love and care, and it is the support on days when you find it hard to stand. Every interaction with the autistic community fills me to the brim with pride. I feel proud to be part of such an incredible community. I feel proud of my friends and the people that they are. But most importantly, I'm proud to be me. I feel proud of my own autistic identity. And in those moments, I wouldn't change a thing. I don't think autistic community impacts pride. I think it creates it. So, what does autistic community mean for autistic well-being and pride? It means everything, and then so much more.
Just someone whose diagnosis missed years of aching, waiting, pacing, dividing self entirely, cutting off pieces, turning them about, masked up, still not enough, internalized, rejected, roaming, stuck on repeat, each effort exposing my intensity. And then that moment came. The doctor finally heard, as it being real, gender dismissal, disregarded, diagnosis. Suddenly, someone I become. One being was all it took, clarity wrought, winning, autism, socially loaded, explaining all the things from triumphs to trials, the exhausting experience, and yet to feel valid, my sensory perceptions, a part of the collective, they didn't even have to choose me. It just was. I just am as them. So much work to do, traumas to work through, but having safe space, that changes everything. Even if it's only a moment shared, that's all it takes to know someone cares. These great gifts grant glory with the occasional horror story, especially within the undefined. I must know the whys. This drive grants me spaces to understand, shattering through faucets, grasping at the unseen. Only human, you see, to miss something. Yet still sensory seeking me, overlapping my own boundaries. Knowledge growth demanded, resulting at times in total overdrive, even breath loss, panic. Things get louder even on silent, electricity exploding, eardrums alone. A cure though? No. For what? To lose the ability to see and be so intrinsically involved? No. The cure for all pain being wide is connection, all diagnosis aside, safe spaces where insides can leak out, needs made valid, having even silence heard. Communication comes in rainbows, and that's where you'll find me. Being.
Hiya.
Hello, I'm David Gray Hammond. I'm here with Tigger Pritchard.
Hiya.
And obviously, if you followed Academy's work, you'll know that we are educators and co-presenters for Academy live streams. We're both still fairly new to Academy compared to Chloe, but we've been asked to do a little short video on autistic identity, culture, and space. And I really want to tie in some stuff about autistic pride here, because that's why we're here. we're here to talk about autistic pride. So let me start with my thoughts, which is I've noticed, when I was younger, say 15 to 20 years ago, autistic people didn't seem so connected. And I guess in a way they weren't, because we hadn't yet had the advent of social media. But we've had the advent of social media, and the beautiful thing about that is it's created autistic spaces. And in those spaces, we have seen a rich culture grow from those spaces. And I think what gave rise to that culture was autistic pride. And quite frankly, that pride, it doesn't necessarily come from the fact that we're here going, we're super proud to be autistic. It's from it's a refusal to be ashamed. We have been told our whole lives by professionals, by literature, by media, that autism is something to be ashamed of. But actually, autistic culture has taught us that we should be proud to be who we are. We should refuse to be ashamed, because who we are is valid, and the diversity of minds is a beautiful thing. What are your thoughts, Tigger?
How can I follow that? Because you are awesome. As we spoke in our little preamble, I consider myself quite, I identified last year as autistic, that almost everybody that knew me knew, and just thought I didn't talk about it. People that met me would go, yeah, he is, and I just wasn't aware. So I feel so young compared. In some ways, I feel so young. In other ways, I don't. But I feel so young compared to others I am meeting and the friends I'm making within this awesome autistic online world that there is at the moment. And I think that when we were talking, I thought of what pride, self-validation, self-respect, self-worth I've been given because of this online community, because of other people themselves standing up and saying, hey, I am autistic and I have a right to be listened to. I have a right to be me. And I have to be honest and say, I have looked at other people, a lot of them now friends, and the people I've met online in the various communities. And I've realized, and I'm learning from all of you about, yes, I do have a right to be me. I do have a right to stand up and to be proud of who I am as an awesome autistic individual, as we all do. And the understanding and the knowledge that goes with, as you said, those decades and decades of misinformation, of being put down and being misunderstood and of being boxed as, oh, you poor thing, there's something wrong with you, is now at long last, I believe very strongly, being eradicated by all of us that are standing up, learning to, struggling to, doing so, recognizing our self-worth, recognizing our pride as who we are as awesomely autistic individuals. And it's adding to it. It's the fact that online presence for me, especially with the present situation on the globe and so on, has meant an awful lot. I'm learning, I'm growing. But if there's one thing I'm learning and growing and changing about, it's that I have a right to be me. I have a right to explore who I am as an autistic individual. I have a right to be proud of the way I think, the way I see, the way I smell, the way I taste, the way I do the things I want to do, because it's me. And with meeting so many other amazing individuals online, I seek out these online interactions because I need them sometimes to recharge my batteries, to recharge my sense of worth, to recharge that validation about me. And it is so good, and it is making me realize more and more and more with every conversation I have, almost with every individual I have to talk online and the occasional few that I see in real life at the moment, that I want to eradicate all those decades of negativity and stand alongside a wealth of other incredible autistic individuals across this gorgeous globe and go, hi, how are you? I have a right to be me, and I am proud to be who I am. And that means so much to me.
And I think this is the point, isn't it? Is autistic culture in its purest form is the antithesis to the medical model of what autism is. I look around and I see a culture of people who want to celebrate their diversity, want to celebrate their differences. We celebrate our strengths and our struggles together.
Yeah.
And it's just so beautiful to see. And it's just what I don't know how to find the words to describe. I'm not just proud to be autistic. I don't just refuse to be ashamed of being autistic. I am proud of the culture we've got. You know, we've just come through one of probably one of the most difficult years that I have ever encountered in my 31 years on this planet. No one could have foreseen this pandemic. And yet I have seen autistic people lift each other up, support each other, and not just support other autistic people. I have seen them support their communities, regardless of neurology. You know, I think of the people I've seen. I've got autistic friends, and me and my autistic friends, we helped out at a food bank every week for a year to feed the local community. Not because we wanted the kudos, but because why should people go hungry? And I think that's just quintessentially part of autistic culture, is a want to do the right thing. You know, people
that need to do the right thing, that need to see things in very clear entities. And also that need that you know, as an autistic individual, as like so many other individuals across the globe, we have that insight into what it means to be looked down upon or to be seen as being different. And that link it gives us then to so many individuals across the globe is so powerful on all our different levels. But you're right also that so many individuals I've seen, yourself on Zoom, online, and others, give back not only to the autistic community, but to the planet around us, because we know it smells right. We know it's what we've got to do. And that I find extremely empowering as well.
And I think to close out, because we only have a few minutes, to close out, you know, that is why autistic culture and pride are just such wonderful things, because the existence of both the autistic culture and the pride that comes out of that autistic culture, they're going to do amazing things for the world. And I just, it makes me want to happy cry and happy flap, and you know, it's just one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen.
It is. And I think with my last bit, with my Tigger head on, it's the fact that the first time ever I felt like I belonged. And I felt like I belonged because of people like you and the other people I've met online and my friends and so on, and those that understand why I do the things I do, why I love to do the things I do. And I think that as you, I see incredible individuals out there who really are a force that want to change things for the better for our planet. And that culture, that identity, for me personally, for me in my, what was it? I'm not 31, I'm a bit older than that, but in my 5+ decades of existence, was really one of the most complex years I could ever think of going through. But if there's one thing that's helped me get through it, it's realizing my place within the gorgeous autistic community, meeting incredible individuals such as you and others, and then finding my place and finding my culture. And that's meant so much to me. And to see what can happen now it's going to be lush. It's going to be absolutely gorgeous. I'm so looking forward to it.
Isn't that just a beautiful thing? Thank you for listening to us, and we'll see you when you come to watch the live streams at Academy.
Yes, do watch the live streams at Academy. They are awesome. Thank you as well. So I'll say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Take care, everybody. Bye.
I'm too sexy for my love. Too sexy for my love. Love's going to leave me.
I'm too autistic for my work, too autistic for my work, and my boss is a jerk. And I'm autistic to my core, autistic to my core. Oh, I'm not a bore. I'm too autistic for your party, too autistic for your party. No way I'm making small talk. Specializations, you know what I mean. Academy educates on the Pride Talk. Yeah, on the Pride Talk. Yeah, on the Pride Talk. Yeah, we educate all during Pride Talk. Not too autistic for the world. World's too NT for me. Who's going to see me? And I'm an autistic adult. Autistically adult. What you know, I've grown up. Specializations, you know what I mean. Academy educates on the Pride Talk. Yeah, on the Pride Talk. On the Pride Talk, yeah. We educate all during Pride Talk. And we're autistic till the end.